In the grand halls of the Galactic Federation headquarters, an emergency meeting of the High Council had been called. Representatives from 1,000-member world sat in stunned silence as the intelligence report was read aloud. Our long-range scans have detected alarming developments on a primitive world in the Sol system, on the edge of Sector 9, intoned the speaker gravely. The inhabitants, who call themselves humans, have been reclassified from Class 7 to Class 14 based on their unexpectedly rapid technological progress and the threat they pose to galactic peace. A Class 14 designation has never before been issued in the history of the Federation. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. A Class 14 rating was theoretical, reserved for only the most dangerous hypothetical civilizations. For a pre-contact society, to leap from a Class 7 backwater to the highest threat level overnight was unprecedented. How could this have happened? Demanded the Alphan ambassador. Our projections indicated they were centuries away from achieving interstellar travel. Are we certain this assessment is accurate? The speaker nodded grimly. We have double and triple checked the data. The humans have developed remarkably advanced technologies in a very short time, ones that could allow them to leapfrog other civilizations if left unchecked. Worse, their history is one of unrelenting warfare and conquest. The combination of these factors makes them an existential threat to the stability of the galaxy. Then they must be contained at once, declared the Zofrax delegate, before they become aware of the greater galactic community. We should blockade their system immediately and sever any potential routes of expansion. That may prove more difficult than anticipated, warned the speaker. The humans have already demonstrated capabilities beyond what a Class 14 world should theoretically possess. An ominous silence fell. The implications of his words were chilling. Then there's only one course of action, said Premier Zyloth, rising from his seat. As the head of the Federation Diplomatic Court, he was the most experienced member of the Council in dealing with volatile species. He personally avoided many conflicts through his deft negotiations, but the grim look on his face suggested this mission would be his greatest challenge yet. We must send an envoy to investigate this world firsthand, to observe the humans closely and assess their capabilities and intentions. Armed with that knowledge, we can determine the appropriate response, containment, integration into the galactic community, or, if necessary, preemptive sanction. Zyloth didn't have to elaborate on what sanction entailed. The oppressive silence spoke volumes. As our most accomplished agent, I volunteer myself for this mission. I will infiltrate human society and uncover the true nature of this crisis. If this threat can be diffused peacefully, I will find the way. And if not, he left the dire alternative unspoken. The council vote was unanimous. Zyloth's ship was prepped with the utmost stealth technologies for the journey to Earth, but as he approached the blue-green world, his sensors lit up with alarm. A barrage of advanced missiles and directed energy weapons lanced up from the planet's surface, shattering his ship's cloaking field instantly. These were weapons that could only be found on the most advanced Federation warships, not a Class 14 backwater. As warning alerts blared and his shields strained under the assault, Zyloth realized with a sinking dread that even their worst assessment of Earth had vastly underestimated humanity's capabilities, and now it looked like he would pay the price for that mistake. Struggling to evade the deadly fusillade and clawing for any gap in their inexplicable planetary defenses, Zyloth fought to bring his crippled ship down to the deadly world below. The true mission was only beginning, with no guarantee he would live to complete it. His last thought before impact was a grim one. Humanity was going to change the galaxy forever, one way or another. Zyloth's ship careened through the atmosphere in a terminal dive, trailing smoke and fire. He'd managed to angle his descent toward a remote stretch of countryside, away from the inexplicably advanced planetary defenses that had crippled his ship. Gritting his teeth against the G-forces, he fought to keep the nose up long enough to activate the emergency landing field. At the last possible moment, the field engaged, absorbing the impact and saving him from being pulverized as the ship augured into the ground. The crash was still bone-jarring, slamming Xyloth against his restraints hard enough to crack ribs. Warning indicators flashed angry red across the console, and the acrid scent of burning electronics filled the air. Xyloth didn't wait for the dust to settle. He knew the impact would draw attention quickly. Ignoring the stabbing pain in his side, he scrambled out of the pulverized craft and activated his personal cloaking field. He needed to assess his surroundings and establish a safe house before the authorities arrived. Pushing through dense underbrush, Xyloth emerged to a sight that stopped him in his tracks. A paved road cut through the forest, filled with ground vehicles traveling at high speed. Their sleek designs bore little resemblance to the primitive combustion-powered conveyances the survey scans had logged only a few years prior. Had their transportation technology advanced this swiftly too? Xyloth followed the road on foot until he reached signs of a dense population center. Towering glass and steel edifices rose in the distance, glittering spires that wouldn't look out of place on a Federation core world. Holographic advertisements flickered on the sides of buildings, touting products and services far beyond what a Class 14 civilization should have. Everywhere Xyloth looked, he saw evidence of a society that had undergone a dizzying technological revolution virtually overnight. It was as if the humans had taken a century's worth of development and compressed it into a scant few years. Xyloth knew he needed to blend in quickly. Using his suit's integrated fabricator, he fashioned local attire and assumed a human phenotype. His cloaking field would shield him from any biometric scans, allowing him to move freely among the populace. His first priority was to tap into the humans' data networks and uncover what had fueled this breakneck advancement. Xyloth ducked into an eating establishment, where patrons gazed at personal screens and information crawled across seemingly every surface. Subtle queries to the screens confirmed they were connected to a worldwide information exchange nexus. He tapped into a public terminal and skimmed centuries of data, growing more and more alarmed. The humans had made staggering breakthroughs in fields that even the most advanced Federation species were still grappling with. Quantum computing, room temperature superconductors, stable antimatter reactors, programmable matter. Innovations that could change the balance of power on a galactic scale, and the humans were on the cusp of mastering them. But most shocking of all was the secret project he uncovered whispers of in the depths of the data vault. On the outskirts of a city called Geneva, a top-secret laboratory was said to be experimenting with technology that could make faster-than-light travel possible. If the rumors were true, it would overturn the most fundamental laws of physics and put the entirety of Federation space within humanity's reach. Xyloth knew he had to see it for himself. Using his suit's advanced infiltration protocols, he slipped past layers of firewalls and security checks, breaching the lab's own network. What he found there stole the breath from his lungs. The experiments were real. The humans were on the verge of cracking the FTL barrier. And if they succeeded, there would be no corner of the galaxy beyond their grasp, or their conquest. In that moment, Xyloth understood with terrifying clarity why Earth had been rated Class 14, and why his mission was now more critical than ever. He had to find a way to stop this, before humanity's rise reshaped the cosmos forever. Reeling from his discovery of humanity's impending faster-than-light breakthrough, Xyloth knew he needed to learn more about these enigmatic beings before he could hope to alter their trajectory. He delved deep into their historical archives, consuming terabytes of data in a bid to understand the forces that had shaped their civilization. What he found was a species defined by contradiction. For every soaring achievement, there was an equally profound act of destruction. Stirring triumphs of unity and compassion were matched by unfathomable cruelty and division. It was as if humanity contained equal capacity for creation and annihilation, and their ultimate fate hung in the balance of which impulse won out. Xyloth marveled at the great projects of engineering and artistry they had constructed in ages past, edifices and artworks that would be hailed as wonders on any Federation world. But he also recoiled at the scars they had carved into their own planet in thoughtless pursuit of progress and dominance. He watched them split the atom, and in virtually the same breath, turn that godlike power against their own kind. The horrors they unleashed on each other in the wars that followed defied comprehension. Time and again, they brought themselves to the precipice of total obliteration, only to pull back at the last moment. It was as if self-destruction was hardwired into their very nature. And yet, for every atrocity, there were also acts of staggering selflessness, instances where humans laid down their lives for complete strangers or poured their entire being into works of charity and compassion. Xyloth couldn't reconcile how a species could contain such extremes. As he pondered this paradox, an alert pinged through the data feed. His translation matrix rendered it as a breaking news update. A simmering regional conflict had just erupted into a full-scale exchange of hostilities. Casualty figures were already pouring in, painting a grim picture of the conflagration's toll. Xyloth felt a chill as he processed the implications. Humanity had already demonstrated a capacity for destruction that outstripped their current technological level. If this was the devastation they could unleash in a limited regional war, how much worse would it be if they achieved FTL and turned that penchant for annihilation outward? With the entirety of the galaxy as their theater, would even the Federation's mightiest worlds be safe? He ran simulations, projecting humanity's destructive potential should they conquer the stars unchecked. The results turned his blood to ice. No civilization, no matter how ancient or powerful, could endure the havoc of a militarized humanity, armed with the technologies he'd seen them pioneering. In every scenario, the galaxy burned. But even as visions of human dreadnoughts blockading alien suns filled his mind, Xyloth forced himself to consider the alternative. What if, instead of destruction, humanity turned its vast potential toward creation and unity? If they could master their own demons and emerge stronger, as they had so many times in their history, how brightly would their light shine across the cosmos? Perhaps, guided by a wiser hand, they could become the greatest force for good the galaxy had ever known, their indomitable spirit and genius enriching the entirety of galactic culture. If their trajectory could be altered, the Federation could gain its staunchest ally, or lose its most formidable rival. As Xyloth watched the news feeds tally the mounting dead, he felt the weight of two civilizations' fate settle on his shoulders. The path humanity chose now would determine the future of the galaxy. To have any hope of steering them toward a better course, he would need to understand them more intimately. It was time for him to walk among them, to live as they did and see their world through human eyes. Only then could he hope to sway the outcome of this pivotal moment. With a thought, Xyloth summoned a human disguise from his suit's memory and stepped out into the streets of Geneva. If he failed in his mission, those streets might one day run red with blood of a dozen worlds. Xyloth moved through the streets of Geneva, his human disguise blending seamlessly with the morning crowds. Though he'd studied thousands of civilizations over his long career, walking among a pre-contact species was always a jarring experience. The casual conversations he overheard were not meant for alien ears, and the unguarded glances he received held no hint of recognition at his true nature. It felt voyeuristic, like he was intruding on a private moment not meant for outsiders. And yet, as he basked in the simple rituals of their daily lives, the greetings between friends, the laughter of children at play, the wafting scent of baked goods from a corner patisserie, Xyloth couldn't help but marvel at the vibrancy and complexity of human culture. For all their capacity for destruction, they had an equal aptitude for joy and connection. His first destination was the University of Geneva, where he'd spotted records of cutting-edge research into fields that could propel humanity's spacefaring ambitions. Posing as a visiting professor, he gained access to faculty lounges and research labs, eavesdropping on conversations and skimming experimental white papers. What he discovered painted an unsettling picture. The humans were pursuing lines of inquiry that even the Federation's brightest minds hadn't dared to explore. Zero-point energy extraction, higher dimensional mathematics, artificial superintelligence. Breakthroughs in any one of these domains could overturn the galactic balance of power overnight. But it was their work on psionic phenomenon that chilled Xyloth to his core. For centuries, the Federation had suppressed knowledge of the rare psychic gifts that manifested in certain species, deeming them too dangerous for widespread use. But here, in clandestine labs shielded from prying eyes, human scientists were not only unraveling the secrets of telepathy and telekinesis, they were developing techniques to imbue ordinary humans with these abilities. If they succeeded, humanity would wield a terrifying advantage over every other civilization in the galaxy. Even the most advanced shielding couldn't repel a concentrated psionic assault, and no defense could guard against the insidious influence of a skilled telepath. Entire worlds could fall without a shot being fired. Xyloth's mind raced as he considered how to contain this looming threat. Simply destroying the research would only delay the inevitable. Humanity's curiosity and ambition would drive them to rediscover these secrets again and again. No, the only hope was to find a way to guide them down a different path, to steer their remarkable ingenuity toward creation and away from conquest. Exiting the university in a daze, Xyloth found himself drawn toward the gleaming spaceport on the outskirts of the city. Towering launch gantries pierced the sky, a testament to humanity's unquenchable thirst to pierce the heavens. He watched as sleek spacecraft roared into orbit on pillars of fire, carrying crews of fearless explorers to the frontiers of human knowledge. As he picked his way through the museum exhibits lining the spaceport's concourse, Xyloth saw the trajectory of humanity's ambitions laid bare. From the first crude satellites to the moon landings to the pioneers eking out footholds on Mars and beyond, every step was fueled by an insatiable drive to discover and expand. And now, with FTL travel within their grasp, the entire cosmos beckoned. Xyloth saw models and concept art for colony ships and exploratory vessels, grand designs to carry human civilization to the stars. But alongside those bright visions, he also found evidence of a darker impulse. Secret files hinted at hidden military projects, warships and weapons designed to bring humanity's penchant for dominance to an unsuspecting galaxy. If those forces had their way, First Contact would become an act of conquest, with alien worlds subjugated beneath human rule. The twin paths of humanity's destiny stretched out before Xyloth, as stark as the gulf between starlight and the void. He knew the hour of reckoning was approaching, when the future not just of human civilization, but of the entire galactic order would be decided. As he stared up at the dizzying dance of spacecraft overhead, Xyloth realized that only he stood between the dream of a galaxy enriched by humanity's brilliance and the nightmare of the cosmos in flames. The burden settled on him like a weight beyond worlds. Xyloth's mind churned with conflicting emotions as he wandered the streets of Geneva, grappling with the enormity of his mission. Every new discovery about humanity's potential filled him with a growing sense of urgency, a desperate need to find a way to avert the looming catastrophe. But even as he plotted how to neutralize the threat they posed, he found himself increasingly captivated by the small moments of grace and compassion he witnessed in their daily lives. The old woman who paused to give directions to a lost child, the young couple who laughed together over a shared umbrella in the rain, the street musician whose haunting melody seemed to still the chaos of the busy street. Each vignette spoke to a fundamental decency that belied the species' capacity for destruction. As he sat in a park, watching children at play, Xyloth was startled by a commotion behind him. A speeding vehicle had careened onto the sidewalk, striking a pedestrian before slamming into a storefront. Shouts of alarm and the wail of emergency sirens filled the air. But what happened next astonished him. Bystanders rushed to the scene, not away from it. Some tended to the injured pedestrian, stemming the bleeding with torn strips of clothing. Others worked to free the trapped driver, heedless of the risk from the vehicle's sparking electronics. They acted with a swift, selfless coordination, as if this was simply what one did in a crisis. Xyloth watched, stunned, as the human capacity for kindness and courage unfolded before him. It was a stark contrast to the clinical assessments of his mission briefings, which painted humanity as a dangerous, volatile species to be contained at all costs. In that moment, he saw them in a new light, not as a threat to be neutralized, but as a young civilization grappling with the weight of their own potential. The same qualities that made them so dangerous, their boundless curiosity, their indomitable will, their talent for rapid adaptation, could also be their salvation if properly channeled. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. What if, instead of working to constrain humanity's development, he could find a way to nurture it along a more constructive path? Guide them away from the destructive impulses that had marred their history, and toward a future where their vast potential could be harnessed for the betterment of all. It would be a daunting undertaking, one that would require every ounce of his skill as a diplomat and strategist. He would need to navigate the labyrinth of human politics, identify key leaders and visionaries who could steer their civilization's course. He would have to find ways to subtly encourage the better angels of their nature, while mitigating their darker impulses. But in that moment, watching everyday humans risk their lives for a complete stranger, Xyloth knew it was a cause worthy of his efforts. The Federation had tasked him with deciding humanity's fate, but what greater service could he render than to help this remarkable young species reach their full potential as a force for good in the galaxy? His mind made up, Xyloth began to plot a new strategy, one that would require all his cunning and resolve. He would have to walk a razor's edge, guiding humanity's development without revealing his true nature or purpose. It was a monumental gamble, with the fate of billions hanging in the balance. But as he watched the emergency responders working together to clear the accident scene, Xyloth felt a glimmer of something he'd never experienced before in all his long years of service: hope. Hope that this chaotic, contradictory, beautiful species could defy the dire predictions and forge a future brighter than any the galaxy had known. With a newfound resolve, Xyloth stood and melted into the crowd, ready to begin the most important mission of his life, not as humanity's judge, but as their unseen guardian. The road ahead would be fraught with peril and uncertainty, but in that moment he knew there was no higher calling than to nurture the fragile promise of this remarkable young race. Xyloth's newfound resolve to guide humanity toward a brighter future burned within him as he set about his self-appointed mission. But he soon learned that navigating the labyrinth of human society was far more treacherous than any challenge he'd faced in his long diplomatic career. His first step was to establish a network of contacts and informants, individuals who could provide him with insight into the key power structures and decision-makers shaping humanity's course. Posing as a consultant, he insinuated himself into the corridors of governments, think tanks, and major corporations, always listening, always probing for levers he could manipulate to subtly steer their trajectory. But the more he delved into the machinations of human institutions, the more he realized how deeply entrenched the forces favoring militarization and conquest were. Powerful factions within the defense establishment and certain multinational conglomerates saw the stars not as a frontier to explore, but as a resource to exploit and control. They poured vast sums into weapons research and sought to shape public opinion toward favoring a more aggressive posture in space. Xyloth worked tirelessly to counter their influence, funneling support to NGOs and advocacy groups promoting peaceful space exploration and international cooperation. He leaked documents exposing the more egregious abuses of the military-industrial complex and seeded academic papers questioning the wisdom of an arms race in space. But for every small victory, it seemed his opponents redoubled their efforts. Xyloth began to feel like he was engaged in a cosmic game of chess, trying to outmaneuver adversaries who controlled most of the board. His efforts took on a new urgency when his network uncovered a black-budget project buried deep within the defense apparatus of a major superpower. Codenamed Project Titan, it sought to weaponize the psionic research he had discovered at the University of Geneva, with the aim of breeding a cadre of telepathically enhanced super soldiers. If they succeeded, it would be an existential game-changer, one that would almost certainly propel humanity down the darkest of the paths he had foreseen. Xyloth knew he had to shut down the project at any cost. Calling in every favor and leveraging every asset he cultivated, Xyloth launched a desperate campaign to expose and discredit Project Titan. He orchestrated leaks, incited public outrage, and maneuvered his political contacts to call for an investigation. But on the eve of what should have been his moment of triumph, as a major news outlet prepared to break the story and parliamentary hearings loomed, Xyloth's luck finally ran out. A shadowy agency with ties to the project had been quietly hunting the leaker for months, and they finally caught his scent. Xyloth was on his way to a clandestine meeting with a key whistleblower when a Black Ops team intercepted him. Despite his advanced training and technological advantages, he found himself swiftly overwhelmed and neutralized. As a bag was thrown over his head and he was bundled into a waiting vehicle, Xyloth's last thought before losing consciousness was a surge of despair. He had failed, and now not only would Project Titan proceed unchallenged, but his true nature and mission would be laid bare to the very forces he had sought to thwart. Xyloth awoke to find himself strapped to an interrogation chair in a featureless black sight cell. His captors had stripped away his disguise and disarmed his hidden defenses. For the first time in his long intelligence career, he found himself completely at the mercy of an adversary. As the door to the cell swung open and a grim-faced man in a dark suit entered, flanked by armed guards, Xyloth steeled himself for what was to come. He had played this game of espionage long enough to know the brutal dance that would now ensue. But as his interrogator loomed over him, Xyloth was startled to see something unexpected in the man's eyes, not cruelty or triumph, but a glimmer of desperate hope. "We've been watching you for a long time," the man said softly. "We know what you are, and we think we know why you're here." He leaned closer, his expression intense. "And now you're going to tell us everything. Because if you really are what we think you are, then you may be the only hope humanity has left." Xyloth stared at his captor, his mind racing as he processed the man's cryptic words. He had expected threats, torture, demands for information about his mission and origins. But this was something else entirely. "What do you mean, I'm humanity's only hope?" he asked warily, testing his bonds as he spoke. They held fast, unyielding against his struggles. The man pulled up a chair and sat facing him, his expression grave. "We belong to a clandestine organization that has been monitoring extraterrestrial activity on Earth for decades. We've long suspected that we were not alone in the universe, but you are the first definitive proof we've encountered." He leaned forward, his gaze boring into Xyloth's. "We also know about Project Titan. We've been working to stop it, just like you. But our efforts have been met with failure at every turn. The forces behind it are too powerful, too entrenched." Xyloth frowned, a glimmer of understanding dawning. "And you think I can help you stop them?" The man nodded. "We've seen what you can do. The technologies at your command, the way you've been able to navigate our society and politics. If anyone has a chance of shutting down Titan before it's too late, it's you." Xyloth considered this, his mind churning with calculations. If these people had been watching him, then they likely knew a great deal about his capabilities already. Continuing to dissemble would serve little purpose. "What's in it for me?" he asked finally, more to gauge their intentions than out of any real hesitation. In truth, the idea of allies in his fight, even human ones, held immense appeal after the setbacks of the last few days. The man's lips quirked in a humorless smile. "Survival," he said bluntly. "Yours and ours. If Project Titan succeeds, it won't just be a threat to other worlds out there. It will almost certainly lead to the destruction of human civilization as well." He stood, pacing the small cell as he spoke. "The psionic powers they seek to harness. We have reason to believe they could trigger a catastrophic feedback loop if deployed on a mass scale. Imagine millions of minds, each amplifying the other's darkest impulses and fears, until all rationality is consumed in a storm of madness and violence. Society would tear itself apart." Xyloth felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen firsthand the heights and depths of human potential, the tightrope they walked between creation and annihilation. To put such godlike power in the hands of their most destructive impulses, it was a terrifying prospect. "What do you propose?" he asked, his voice rough. The man stopped pacing and faced him. "An alliance. Your knowledge and technology, our resources and human insight. Together, we might have a chance of stopping this before it's too late." He held out a hand, a gesture of partnership that transcended species and origin. "Will you join us?" Xyloth hesitated only a moment before nodding. The man unlocked his restraints, and he stood, rubbing his chafed wrists. "I will help you," he said solemnly. "But understand this. My loyalty is not to any one nation or faction, but to the future of your species as a whole. If I do this, it will be on my terms, and for the good of all humanity." The man nodded, respect and understanding in his eyes. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And with that, an unlikely alliance was forged. A human resistance fighter and an alien agent, bound together by a shared mission to save a world on the brink. The path ahead would be perilous, with no guarantee of success. But as Xyloth shook the man's hand, he felt a flicker of that same hope he had experienced watching the humans come together in crisis. If he could mirror that spirit, that fundamental decency and courage in his own actions, then perhaps there was still a chance for humanity to step back from the abyss and choose a better future. With a newfound determination, Xyloth turned to his new partner, ready to plan their next move against the forces that threatened them all. The stakes could not be higher, but in that moment, he knew there was no worthier fight in all the galaxy. In the days that followed, Xyloth and his new human allies threw themselves into the fight against Project Titan with a desperate intensity. They'd raided black sites, sabotaged supply lines, and leaked damning evidence to the media, doing everything in their power to slow the project's progress and turn public opinion against it. But for every facility they shut down, every shipment they intercepted, Titan's backers seemed to redouble their efforts. It was like fighting a hydra. Cut off one head, and two more grew in its place. As the days turned to weeks, Xyloth began to despair of ever truly stopping the project. The forces arrayed against them were just too vast, too deeply entrenched in the halls of power. But even as he grappled with the mounting odds, he found himself increasingly inspired by the courage and conviction of his human comrades. They fought not for personal gain or glory, but out of a deep, abiding love for their species and their world. They believed, truly believed, that a better future was possible, and they were willing to lay down their lives to achieve it. It was a kind of selfless dedication that Xyloth had never encountered in all his long years of service to the Federation, and as he watched them throw themselves into the fight, day after day, he felt something stir within him, a sense of kinship, of shared purpose that transcended the bounds of species and origin. When the end came, it came suddenly. Through a combination of skill, luck, and sheer bloody-minded determination, they finally managed to breach the primary Titan research facility. In a ferocious firefight, they battled their way to the central labs, where the nightmare fruits of the project's labors were finally revealed. Row after row of psionic amplifiers, each capable of focusing and magnifying the latent abilities of a human subject to terrifying levels. And in the center of it all, the crown jewel of the project, a neural network that could link them all together, fusing their powers into a single world-shattering weapon. In that moment, Xyloth knew what he had to do. As his human allies held off the last desperate counterattack of Titan's defenders, he fought his way to the central control node. With a few deft keystrokes, he introduced a cascading systems failure into the network, turning its vast power in on itself. The resulting implosion shook the facility to its foundations, vaporizing the labs and all their horrific creations in a blinding flash of psionic energy. Xyloth barely managed to drag his allies clear before the entire complex collapsed in on itself, burying the last traces of Project Titan beneath tons of rubble. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, and the world struggled to make sense of the shocking revelations that followed. Xyloth knew his mission was finally complete. The threat of Titan had been eliminated, and with it, the specter of a future where humanity's worst impulses held unchecked sway. But even as he prepared to take his leave of Earth, to return to the stars and make his report to the Federation, Xyloth knew his work was not yet done. For he had seen, firsthand, the incredible potential that lay dormant within the human species, a potential for greatness that, if properly nurtured, could transform the galaxy itself. And so, as he bid farewell to his human comrades, now more than allies, friends, brothers and sisters in arms, Xyloth made a silent vow. He would return to the Federation, and he would use every ounce of his influence and persuasion to convince them of what he now knew to be true. That humanity's destiny lay not in conquest or destruction, but in partnership, a joining of human ingenuity and passion with the wisdom and guidance of the wider galactic community. Together, they could achieve wonders beyond imagining, and forge a future brighter than any that had come before. As he watched the blue-green jewel of Earth recede beneath his ship, a sense of profound hope swelled within Xyloth's heart. The road ahead would be long, and not without its challenges. But he knew, with a certainty that transcended all doubt, that it was a journey worth taking. For at the end of that road lay a promise unlike any the galaxy had ever known, the promise of a tomorrow where the light of human potential, tempered by wisdom and guided by compassion, would blaze forth like a beacon for all the stars to see. And as Xyloth set his course for the vast, unknowable reaches of the cosmos, he knew he would carry that promise with him always, a flame eternal, lighting the way to a future beyond wonder.